poem, second anniversary of your coming out, you left us. I didn't get to know you, but our sisterhood runs deep, and so I peer inside and still, 4 years later, find a bicameral waltz whirling through a noisy throng. Here sad, there angry, questions with no answers, fulminations met only by echoes. Returning to those photos, you look perhaps too gentle for this journey we did not seek and which demands so very much. But then I gaze into the mirror and wonder if but for a blessing here or a grace there. That fateful anniversary, you took the dark path, made your quietus and sought the undiscovered country, the moody Dane might say. Well, to me, it also seemed you fell into a Dantean abyss many can't imagine, lost the way back, and left behind hope, a life unlived, verses unwritten, and broken hearts. May you finally be at peace, Joylyn. Thank you.
Beautiful, Jennifer. Very moving. Thank you for sharing that. And yeah, what you're saying about working with concept versus getting a line or a phrase or whatever, I really do think that it seems to me the writers who work from that angle certainly get a lot more accomplished. I don't know. when you're relying too much on inspiration, then trying to find out where it's going. I mean, it can lead in some surprising and beautiful discoveries, but that one that derived from concept obviously needed the time to perk at the same.
It did. It needed some time to percolate.
Yeah. And yeah, I'm the same. If things are too close to the heart, I got to give them some distance. and it's all good.
That's right.
Yeah, beautiful. Anyway, that was a lovely tribute. Thank you. All right, so let's move on to our featured reader. So Shelley Penner is gonna entertain us for about 10 minutes or so here, and then we'll do some Q&A after that if all goes well. And for those of you who don't know Shelley, she's a local artist here in Port Alberni, both a visual artist and a literary artist, very productive in both those departments. And I like what you said on your bio about that your creativity is your way to connect with the divine, and I could relate to that. I mean, it seems to me when we're in that creative groove, it's just like it's the divine channel is opened up, right?
Exactly. It's like energy flowing through you.
Yeah, beautiful.
I think any creative person can relate to that.
Yeah, yeah. And you don't even have to think of it spiritually. Just the universe is just channeling through you, whatever way you choose to come.
Yeah, the energy of the universe. Exactly.
Yeah. So I understand you're going to read some of your stories to us tonight. Some of your short stories. Is that from your short story collection?
A little bit. It's not whole stories or anything, but yeah, I have several books that I've had published, but this is my most recent one, From the Shores of Eden. And yeah, I can really relate to what Jennifer was saying about a conceptual theme and how much harder it is to make it come together, because this is really, most of what I write is basic plot-driven pulp fiction, but this one is more conceptual. Mind you, it's a series of short stories that are connected and along the theme of the initiation rituals of Stone Age peoples, and how our history is the initiation of the human race. So I'm going to read a little bit from the central story, which goes into detail of the rituals, the male initiation rituals in a Stone Age culture. The coarse binding of braided grass chafed the boy's wrist, but his heart and mind soared free like his name, Shusha, wind spirit. Like the hawk circling overhead, golden feathered, freedom exulted against the evening blue. The boy remained only distantly aware of the woman's voice droning on, words to bind him forever as the rope bound him now. He waited, his heart a slow, steady drumbeat, though he knew this night would bring an end. For an instant, he saw through the fierce, penetrating eyes of the bird, the broad, grassy sweep of Koru Call, shimmering in the changing light, slung like a blanket cradle between the rugged palisade of cliffs to the east and the sawtooth chain of mountains to the west. At the head of the cradle, a cluster of mud and wattle huts, the Halaveda of the Koru Denai, hard etched in the evening light, cast long indigo shadows across the tumbled shoals of the river. And before one hut sat a woman and a boy, bound together by a grass cord. The hawk dipped suddenly, then steadied and drifted westward, beyond range of the boy's poor human vision. Remember the lessons of childhood when you walk the spirit world, the woman admonished him between strokes as she ground wild grain between flat rocks. A large woman, she remained strong, but no longer young. The winds of grief had eroded her until only stark granite endurance remained. You must honor the mother in all things, she murmured. Her voice continued, slow, monotonous, easy to ignore. The mother holds the greatest power of all, the power to bring forth new life. Shusha doubted the primacy of the mother's power, considering that the father could erase the universe with a thought, or change the very landscape of existence with a dream. But he felt no desire to argue with her on this day. Always remember the law of Eden, that every act, every ritual, every word spoken shall preserve the mother as she was on the first day. None of this sounded new to Shusha, and his attention wandered once more. He watched the final chapter in the daily battle between light and dark. Across the valley, the wedge-shaped mountain, Noraku's blade, turned red with Miranda's blood. Myth told of a time when no sun existed, and of a battle between two brothers over whether to light a torch or walk in darkness. When Noraku drew blood, the spirit father grew angry and condemned the brothers to walk separate paths, so that now by day Miranda's torch moved across the sky, lighting the way until he met his brother Noraku at the edge of the world, where they quarreled each evening until Miranda's torch was quenched, to be rekindled at dawn. As evening washed the last crimson stain from the sky, 3 ominous figures emerged from the deeply pooled shadows between the Vedu, the shelters of the summer camp. Wooden masks hid their faces, and they walked naked except for a coating of charcoal decorated with blood and feathers. They advanced in ominous silence. Shusha rose, apprehensive now the moment had finally come. The woman thrust herself in front of him, tightening the leash which bound him to her. She shouted a defiant challenge, but the 3 apparitions swept down on them and thrust her aside. With noisy determination, she tried to fight them off, an outraged crow flapping and shrieking ineffectually. The ghost men quickly seized Shusha and slashed the cord, severing him forever from her protection. They dragged him roughly away. Help me, she screamed. Degadon Dakite is going to kill my son. She clawed her scalp until blood ran down her face, but no help came. The men of the village had gone far away to a secret gathering place, preparing for an important ceremony. They would return to find their sons taken, for new cries arose now from other parts of the camp. Screams for help and wails of grief followed Shusha and the ghost men into the gathering darkness. Nevertheless, the boy felt a certain satisfaction as he stripped away the remains of the grass cord. Through the early part of the night, the ghost men chivied and guided him across the valley floor in deathly silence, setting a hard pace, expecting him to keep up with their longer strides. He settled into an easy lope, offering his eerie abductors, no resistance. By the time the moon crossed the valley and set behind the southern hills, the capture party reached the foot of the sacred mountain. They slowed, feeling their way up the rocky slope by instinct in the starlight. Multiple trails converged here, and the path hugging the wall of the cliff felt worn smooth by the passage of thousands of generations. This place remained profoundly sacred, strictly forbidden to females, and certain death for children. So that's, thank you. That's one of the stories. Do I still have time, Derek? I do, okay.
Oh, for sure, yeah.
So
Yeah. Go ahead.
I would also like to tell you about a book I have coming out just in a couple of weeks. It's called Random Words, and it's actually a collection of short stories. I'm going to read you the introduction and part of the first story. During the time of the COVID pandemic, the membership of my writers group began to dwindle as more and more people went into self-isolation. When our local community hall closed its doors for the duration, we began meeting in our homes. The core group of 7 dropped to 6. We began a weekly exercise to keep us inspired. Each week, we would come up with one word or short phrase apiece to create a list of random words we would use in whatever we wrote for the following meeting. One of our members also had a set of dice with pictograms on each side, which we occasionally used for image prompts. The COVID restrictions changed again, and we all had to go into stricter isolation. So we began doing our meetings on Zoom and Google Meet. Another member dropped out because she had no interest in learning to use a computer. As a result, the membership and the weekly word list dwindled to 5, and occasionally even to 4, when one member or another had commitments elsewhere. Each week, I would use those random words to inspire a short story. Some ended up very short. Others I wrote in sections, each week adding a new segment with the latest random words included. Once we missed making up our list, and I resorted to the dictionary. Close your eyes and point to find a word list. Working with random words wasn't always easy, but it was always inspiring. This collection includes the best of my random word short stories, plus a few using visual prompts and another handful of older stories. At the beginning of each tale, I show the given words with which I had to work so readers can see how each one inspired the direction of the story. So this first story is called Bird Watching. And the given words are perky, quintessential, crow, prime directive is re-election, streak, and she had the best ass in the Western world. In a small Mexican village in the mountains of the Sierra Madre, 5 men lounged outside the cantina in the late afternoon sun, drinking beer and sharing manly talk. The proprietor of the establishment drank his last swallow, uttered a satisfied burp, then bellowed into the dark interior. "Maria, we need another round out here." His wife shouted back, "I am busy serving the paying customers. If you want to give away all our profits to your friends, you can just do it yourself. I will not aid in our downfall." With a sigh, her husband Carlos unfolded himself from behind the table, gathered up the empties and headed inside, saying, "Sorry, amigos, it looks like you'll have to pay for your pleasure today. The boss has spoken." A lean, lanky man, the small beer belly overhanging his belt made him look like he might soon give birth. He returned a few moments later with 5 more beers and resumed his place in the tableau. "So, Jorge, how goes the election campaign?" Angelo Castaneda smirked, knowing the mayor's primary objective at present was re-election. Jorge had accomplished little during his time in office, but despite the fact everyone in the village felt fed up with his incompetence, everyone would vote for Jorge anyway, because no one else wanted the job, and the only alternative, Juan Dominguez, seemed even worse. On track for another win. Jorge replied smugly. That Mensa Dominguez makes it so easy with his talk of American investors, golf courses, and resorts. He would bulldoze our homes and tell us while he makes us homeless how lucky we are that he's bringing prosperity. Prosperity for who? They sucked on their beers and thought in silence about how prosperity for the rich usually meant hard work for the poor. Loud hammering began down the street, and Carlos observed, Navarro must be working on his shack again. That boy thrives on work, always laboring on something. That dump is actually beginning to look livable. Senora Peralta skittered across the square with a cloth bag under her arm, a perky little sparrow of a woman, plump and cheerful. There now, look at that, Jorge, old Roberto said teasingly. A widow and a fine figure of a woman. A politician ought to have a wife. Across the plaza, Senora Peralta met with Margarita Salinas, and the two women set out a row of chairs for the sewing circle in the shade of the community hall while the men watched. Jorge leaned his chair back against the wall, balancing on two legs. The chair creaked alarmingly beneath his considerable weight as he shook his head. 2 divorces have cured me of making that mistake again. Besides, she's too old and fat for my taste. How about this one? Carlos asked, amused. Gabriela Espinosa hurried to the meeting, her skirt snapping around her legs like wings in the afternoon breeze, her hawkish features intent. They all knew she had a husband and 5 children, but assessing the virtues and faults of passing women had become an enjoyable pastime for the 5 men. Too energetic, Jorge replied. I feel tired just looking at her. Then, like a stately stork, Rosa Ramos stalked across the square from her home at the east end of town to join the gathering women. Tall and dressed all in black, Rosa wore her hair pulled back severely into a tight bun at her nape. A streak of white ran from her hairline to bisect her right eyebrow, a souvenir of her late husband's brutality. She glanced at the indolent men and her lip curled a little. That one has the evil eye, Jorge muttered. A dangerous woman. I wouldn't be surprised to learn she killed old Pedro herself, even though they say he drank himself into a heart attack. That old crow is always glaring at me as if she'd like to turn me into a toad. Miguel, the youngest of the 5 men, smirked and teased. Maybe she just recognizes your toadliness. He looked at Jorge, squat and ugly, overflowing the wooden chair with his thick knees splayed in a macho pose, and wondered how any woman could bear to lie with him. Miguel felt proud and flattered that these elders of the community included him in their circle, but in truth he felt little respect or affection for any of them. Old men, he thought with contempt, past their prime and likely unable to satisfy a woman anyway. Now there's something I wouldn't mind sharing the blankets with, Jorge leered. Miguel turned to look and saw Carlos Ramos returning from the tiny communal laundry with a basket of damp clothing on her hip. Just the thought of her sharing anything with Jorge or any other man made him feel angrily possessive. She waved cheerfully to her mother and moved on gracefully down the street. The men watched in silent admiration. I swear she has the best ass in the Western world, Jorge sighed in appreciation. I would sure like to sink myself into her bones. Antonio Molina, who rarely had much to say, reproached the mayor. For the love of God, Jorge, you are old enough to be her grandfather. I still have blood in my veins, do I not? My soldier can still stand to attention, and that little puta is enough to make a dead soldier jump up and salute. Apparently unaware of the male attention she had drawn, Carmelita swayed across the plaza, as elegant as a swan in her crisp white dress, her long silky hair just a shade or two darker than her smoothly tanned skin. She seemed the quintessential picture of healthy youth, sweet and alluring as untasted honey. Carlos's wife Maria appeared in the doorway, scowling as she surveyed the 5 men. Sensing an odd intensity in their silence, she demanded, "What are you reprobates up to?" Carlos replied with absent mildness, "Bird watching." As if to lend credence to his reply, a swirl of pigeons and sparrows landed a few feet away. Maria snorted skeptically and retreated back inside. Okay.
Beautiful, Shelley. Thank you. Just
Thank you.
admire your versatility. It doesn't seem to matter what, you know, what part of the world you go to or what subject matter you take on, you embody it. That was great, both of them. So I want to throw it open for questions and answers here, if you don't mind. Anybody has anything they want to ask Shelley about her process or where she, well, I think we've got a good glimpse at where some of your inspiration comes from anyway. I really enjoyed that initiation story, you know, and I remember back in the day when Robert Bly was kind of the head of the men's movement, you know, and he talked a lot about the lack of initiation for males these days, and
Males or females.
Yeah, it's something that fell by the wayside, and I think to society's detriment for sure, you know.
I agree.
Yeah. The closest I think men came to initiation, and when I was growing up, was that maybe your dad would take you to the bar or something, you know, if your father was a drinker, and then you were accepted as a man, and oh my God, yeah, so not a real healthy thing. Anyway,
well, better the bar than the whorehouse.
That's true. That's true. Yeah, in Europe, I think it was the brothel. Dear. So, anyone have a question out there? I can only see half of the people. So if anybody else, Jackie's got her hand up. Go ahead, Jackie.
I do. Shelley, so you have a really diverse portfolio of work. And is there any common thread that weaves its way through these lovely pieces for you as a writer?
Well, yes, there is. I'm not so much with the short stories, because they're inspired by those random words. They tend to be very eclectic. But I'm finding that a lot of my work tends to be about outsiders trying to find a place for themselves, trying to find acceptance.
Why is that? What about that fascinates you?
I'm not sure. It just, I guess maybe empathy for those outsiders.
It sounds like junior high school to me, so I was just checking. You know, I thought maybe that was an influence.
Well, I have to admit, I was an outsider in junior high and senior high.
That's junior high. That's junior high.
So the Miguel character in the last story then would be kind of the outsider there in that
No.
the five men.
I don't think there's an outsider in that one.
Yeah.
That one, yeah, being a random word story, it's
a little less that way.
A little
Still,
less.
I think I could make the case for him being that person.
Because, yeah, well, he maybe is a bit of an outsider, but if he is, it's out of choice because he thinks he's better. You know.
Yeah. But not unusual for the artist to identify as the outsider, I don't think, because often, you know, they end up being outside community. Sorry, Karl, go ahead, man.
How did you come up with the title?
Well, because they were, as each woman comes by, the first one's a perky little sparrow, and the next one is stalking like a stork or something. I forget just exactly what I said. And then Carmelita, the young girl, is graceful as a swan. So they're bird watching.
Makes sense to me.
Oh, Dave's got a question. Unmute yourselves there, David and Kathy.
Have a mouse.
Oh, so I like, for me, you know, with people talking about concepts or particular things, everyone's different, but for me, I can't write without a deadline and, you know, a magic word or an image, you know, as a prompt. And then
to inspire, yes.
What has interested me is that one of the groups that we've been in is given a prompt or a picture or a word, people will come back, you know, 6 people will come back with 6 utterly different pieces of writing. And what strikes me is they're not writing about the word. What everyone has found is that there was a story waiting, waiting to come out. I mean, for me anyway, that's true. And if I was, it's a disaster when somebody says to me, write something, use your imagination. I can't do it. But if they give me a word or a picture prompt and they say you've got 1 week, or sometimes they say you've got 15 minutes, then it will come out. But who was it? I think the composer Bach said, when they said, how do you write all that, your symphonies? And he says, I have trouble not tripping over them when I get out of bed in the morning. But there are some people who do, and I know that they do. And, Georges Simenon used to write 1 book a week. He used to write a novel a week. No, year after year, no problem. And that's not me. So I think there are people who have something inside which is not going to come out unless, and I think that's what you were doing, unless they're given something. And quite often, to my surprise, there it comes out. It would not have come out except for that. Anyway, that's what I'm doing.
Yeah, I know what you're saying. I find the random words inspire short fiction. Until we started doing the random word stories, I had maybe written at most 3 or 4 short stories in my life. I had written 17 manuscripts, like full book-length manuscripts, and only 4 short stories. I found keeping it short hard. But the random words inspired ideas.
Yeah. And
having to have it ready for the next week forced me to keep it short.
Yeah.
But yeah, I find, for me, I don't trip over the stories when I'm getting up, but they keep me awake at night. Until I get them down on paper, they keep me awake.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much. That was awesome.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Yeah, appreciate that. So I guess your book is available at rcnmedia.com. Is that the best place to get a hold of them?
That's right. Yes. This one is available now. The random word story is coming out in a couple of weeks, but it's available for pre-order at the moment. I'm not sure if Colton still has the sale, like he always gives a deal for pre-orders. So
pre-orders, yeah. I'm sure he'd honor it.
I'm sure he would.
Totally. All right. Well, that's great. And maybe slip that into the chat there, just so. Oh, Jackie did. Super. Thank you. Jackie's on it as usual. Jackie. Where would we be without the team? All right, so we'll move on to another open mic reader now then, I guess, with your words resonating in the back of our heads there, Shelley. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Kathleen, you're the next reader up, and looking forward to what you have to share with us tonight. And maybe you want to just mention first a little bit about this anthology that you're in that's with Pat Bucknell. What's that all about? Where did that come from?
That's Demeter Press, and it's if you go to the website, there's a whole list of writers in it, and I didn't know Pat Bucknell was going to be in it until I got the notification, and I went to the website and just scrolled down through the authors, and I'm sure it's the same one. There couldn't be another Pat Bucknell.
No.
And I thought it makes sense because it's nonfiction, and it was just the theme of family secrets. So
juicy.
That was it. And so it's coming out in January 2023. And that's why I put the website of Demeter Press, because that's a Canadian press, and they're giving that 30% discount if you pre-order. But otherwise, Karl, you can get it on Amazon, I'm sure.
Well, I'm sure that 30% would cover, any money that he's saving on the shipping. I mean, yeah.
You got break even that way.
All right. Okay, I'll give you the floor here, Kathy, and you can take it away.
Okay. All right, then. I've got Mars and Billy and Anne are in a cave in the end of the 1920s. So they've been on this guided tour, and they've been having a fight over the difference between stalagmites and stalactites, but that's just winding down here. So all of a sudden, Billy says, I know something. We're all alone. We better catch up with the others. Come on, let's go. The children followed the winding path until they came to the shore of an underground lake. They could just make out the back of a boat as it disappeared around the end of the part of the lake they could see. Oh no, we missed the boat, the children all said at once. We'll have to go back the other way, the way we came. Then we can get to the elevator and go back up that way, Billy said. He started leading them all back along the path. When they had been with the group following the guide, they hadn't noticed the different turns in the path, but now they did, and they weren't sure which ones to take. They kept going until they ended up in a big room that was pitch dark. I can't see anything, Anne said. Water's dripping on my head, and it smells rotten in here. And I'm cold, Mars said. You can feel along the walls. I can feel a tunnel here. I'm going to crawl in and see if it leads to a way out, Billy said. Billy, don't do that. You don't know where that tunnel goes. It's too dangerous, Mars said. Billy, where are you? Anne asked. Mars and Anne reached their hands out, feeling in the dark, but there was no Billy. They found the entrance to the tunnel and reached in, but there was still no Billy. They shouted Billy's name over and over, but there was no answer. I saw a movie once where a kid was crawling in a tunnel and came to the end and just fell into nothing, like falling off a cliff. Maybe that's what happened to Billy, Anne said. Or maybe he's stuck, Mars said. Oh no, then he'll never get out, and he'll starve to death and rot in there, like Lois Lane and the old miner nearly did on Superman, until Clark Kent turned into Superman and saved them. There's no Superman here, Anne. We gotta save him. I got an idea. Anne, you crawl in. I'm not crawling in no dark tunnel and falling off a cliff like Billy. It's his fault. We told him not to go in there. It's not fair, Anne said, and started to cry. Anne, you didn't let me finish. You crawl in, and I'll crawl in behind you and hold your feet, but I will keep my feet outside the tunnel. Then you grab Billy's feet, and I can pull you both out, Mars said. That's a terrible idea, Anne said. You got a better one? Anne didn't like it, but she crawled into the tunnel. All the while, Anne was thinking, what if Billy is just falling off a cliff and I grab his boots and he pulls me down with him? Or what if Billy didn't tighten his boots properly, which he never does, and I grab his boots and Mars pulls me out and there's no Billy, just empty boots? Or what if Mars gets too scared and runs away and leaves me stuck with Billy in this stupid tunnel? At last, Anne felt Billy's boots and grabbed on tight. She kicked her boots to let Mars know she had Billy, and Mars started pulling until all three of them were out of the tunnel. I thought I was a goner. I got stuck in that tunnel. I couldn't move forward and I couldn't move backward, Billy told them. The children sat close together on the floor of the dark stone room in order to keep warm. I got an idea. Let's each tell a story. What's the worst thing that ever happened to you in your whole life? Anne, you go first, and then Billy, you go. Does it have to be only one thing? So many worse things have happened in my life. So I'll leave them stuck in the tunnel, and you won't even find out what the worst thing was. That's it.
I don't know if I'm going to be able to sleep, Kathleen. That's cruel. That's great. Great tension in there. It reminded me of when I did a little bit of spelunking with my family in but close to Canmore, and the guide told us a story about when he went in solo one time, and his batteries died on his lamp. So he got out the spare batteries and put them in, and lo and behold, they died too. And he was at like the far end of this long spelunk. And so he navigated his way back out by using the Indiglo on his watch. He managed to make it out alive. And he was still spelunking. Oh, God, if that ever happened to me, that would be it. I'd never do it again. but yeah, great claustrophobia in that pitch black under there. Oh my God.
Yeah, yeah. That tunnel thing actually was, my brother was a caver, and he was in a cave in Tennessee, and he told me that actually happened, that he got into this, when they go into caves that nobody's been in before, they get in a tunnel and they don't know. But he said he got to the point where he couldn't back up.
Oh my God.
And he said, and I said, oh my God, what happened? Are you insane? He said, well, luckily it widened and I got out the other side.
Yeah.
So,
he could still be under there to this day.
Yeah.
Otherwise, who knows?
Well, yeah, and then I wouldn't have the story.
No. Thank God he made it out.
Yes, thank God. Thank you, brother.
All right. Okay, well, we'll get you to turn the screen over to Dave there. Good evening, David. How are you this evening?
Well, I'm going to have nightmares now I've heard those two stories, because I need lots of space around me.
Me too.
Lots of space. I don't know. This is it's a slice of life, and I can't remember if there was a image prompt or a word prompt. So we'll just have to take the slice of life.
All right, slice on.
Okay. Tom Hillier's dog was gone, but Tom kept the rug and the sagging basket in the kitchen. They were something to talk to. That cottage up by the park, end of Claiborne Street, the one they were demolishing, Tom had built that cottage, bricklayer back then, and there were only two in the whole street built of brick. Tom glanced down at his pale fingers. Lime does that and it stays, lime in the cement. What? His eyes drifted from his hand to the shopping bag. Tom lifted his shopping bag from the kitchen doorknob. Knocking it down, he shook his head at the tug basket. The leaves too were down, and the back lane was greasy and damp. Just as well the dog was gone. Towser used to pull so hard, and the dying days of November were treacherous for an 80-year-old man with shopping and a tearaway mongrel. After filling his basket at Ananda Foods, Tom paid Mr. Patel in mostly coins before he conceded a banknote or two, taking his time. The shop was warm. Tom smiled at Mr. Patel. I'm slow to count them out because I earned them and I don't like to let them go. He noticed how the numbers tumbled about on the register and on the labels, and how the money piled up 1, 2, 3, like setting fresh bricks onto mortar you just laid down, building. He shook his head and apologized to Mr. Patel. The bag bumped his legs, heading home the long way, round the park, with the swings and the shrill infant school playground. At the top corner of the park, Tom reached out and touched the small tree trunk, as he always did. He touched it with his left hand, always his left hand, and whispered Stanley Spencer's May Tree, and then Hail Mary, just for luck. A young mother shepherding her child on a tricycle looks anxiously at Tom as his hand patted the scratchy bark. Are you okay? She thinks I'm gaga, thought Tom, but chuckled and shook his head because she was just being kind. Thank heavens, people keep being kind, never mind what's in the newspapers. At the public library, where he read newspapers on Saturdays, at the public library there was a framed picture they always looked at, a painting of a tree in bloom, a tree standing by itself in a meadow, and the title was The May Tree, because it had May blossom. Silly label, May is the flower of the hawthorn tree. The flowers were always called Mayflowers, white clusters, in May, of course, when the blossoms came out. Tom missed the sweet white perfume. Just bare branches today on the hawthorn at the top of the park, which Tom touched for luck as he walked past. In the library's picture, the May tree was always in bloom, just above Tom's favourite radiator, where he hung his gloves and hat if it was a damp day, and if he got a seat nearby. New green paint on that radiator. They should try different paint that didn't smell like hospitals and giving in. There were no berries in the painting, of course, because they'd come later in October. Tight bunches of red berries, and they were called haws from a hawthorn. The women in the village used to make wine out of hawthorn berries. The old lady's thick, sweet wine would send you to sleep. Rosehip wine, too, they made, rosehips from wild roses. Both were as red as those poisonous yewberries in the churchyard. The library had put a photograph of the artist next to the May tree painting, a black and white photograph of Stanley Spencer. Stanley Spencer. Stanley's the name for a carpenter or a glazier, or perhaps a locomotive engineer. Stanley, a good reliable name. This Stanley Spencer, though, had an odd face. The artist looked like he might be sickly or weak or have something not right in his head. Ouch, there he'd done it again, stepped off the curb without being ready. Saying Hail Mary just now at the hawthorn tree hadn't saved him. Tom added a Hail Mary every time he touched the tree because he liked the idea of a woman who was full of grace, who would forgive all your mistakes and weaknesses. Not that Tom was a Roman Catholic. The Baptist chapel of his childhood had been chill for a boy in short pants, chilly. And now the frozen peas in his shopping bag had dampened Tom's leg through the cloth while he was waiting for a clear crossing at the road. A dog barked at him through some wooden palings, then ceased as Tom ignored it. Dogs were finished for Tom, unless Towser came back, which he wouldn't. Ahead at home, Tom's lunch plate and cutlery would be waiting on the kitchen table. He liked to set things up well ahead of time. And the glass for his orangeade. Well, not glass, plastic. Tom had finally switched to plastic, as the glasses had broken one by one in the clumsy sink with the stains under the dripping tap. He paused at the back gate, letting the shopping tilt down on one side and letting his other arm raise up for the latch. That was the trick. Always balance one weight against another for safety. Nearly December, so it was 6 months before the May blossom would come out again on the hawthorn tree at the top of the park. It smelled sweet from a distance, and then people who didn't know better would stick their silly face right into the blossoms and suddenly get that dead body stench. One of nature's little tricks. No telling what life might throw at you. Tom wondered if the soap companies made a hawthorn blossom smell nowadays. There was a gift shop on the main road. They had all kinds of soap in there. You could smell it from far away. It was confusing. He'd go in and ask them next time he was along that way, which would be next Saturday, on his way to the public library and Stanley Spencer's May tree.
Beautiful. Thank you, David. Fantastic character portrait that was. My goodness. And I have a feeling that you were a keen observer in your childhood. I just
Yeah.
Nothing got by you. I think you noticed every little detail, and they all stuck with you because your writing is always so rich that way. It's good.
Yeah, I think so. I was always trying to figure people out.
Yeah, that's good. Good way to be. Yeah, excellent. All right. Well, thanks for sharing that with us. That was awesome. Okay, our next reader is Bob, aka Joe Lunchbucket. How's Bob doing this evening, and what you got to read to us tonight?
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we got you now, Bob. Go ahead.
Okay. Big UFO was orbiting Earth like our satellites, and their small ships survive all the space trash circling Earth and announce to the world that they're landing in New York City Airport. UN officials greet aliens that speak English almost fluently. The visitors are as far advanced beyond us as explorers with gunpowder and steel were above Aboriginals on first contact. They come from an overpopulated planet and ask only to settle on vacant desert land. In exchange, they'll end global warming, medical ills, bring lasting world peace, and advance our technology to their level. This offer requires much thought because we don't know if ET are that planet's best or are like Australia's colonists. Awed by newcomers' technology, after some discussion, United Nations greedily accepts. The newcomers start with educating Earth Aboriginal children in large schooling centers. They could keep nations divided. Instead, they use English as common language of communication to function in their technologically advanced industries. Asteroid threats, tsunamis, flooding, global warming, and hunger have been eliminated, and Earth is no longer divided, but has a common language of communication and space travel. As ET brought yet another religion and inadvertently or by design plagued us with pandemic to thin the herd and save endangered species from extinction. Conquerors are never deemed benevolent, and Earth's Aboriginals can't compete with them. Drunk on newcomers' sacramental wine, we awake dispossessed of best real estate, serving new masters because we were lured by their technology. Will Homo sapiens lose nomad independence that kept us warring and exploring new lands as we exhausted resources? Now that we have space travel, will we be forced to seek new worlds to colonize, even though our sun will last another 5 billion years? That's it.
Awesome. Thank you, Bob. That was reaching out into new territory for you. A little glimpse into the future, a little allegory going on. Interesting, interesting. Thank you for that. All right, Jackie Carmichael is going to be our next reader here this evening. And Jackie, what are you going to share with us?
Thank you, Derek. I am reading from my book, Heard Amid the Guns, True Stories from the Western Front, 1914 to 1918. And this was published almost 2 years ago, I guess, by Heritage House. So, and the piece is called An Unwilling Sacrifice. The Beechey family of Lincolnshire, England, had 8 sons, losing 5 of them to the war. 5 crosses were hewn from stones salvaged from the Lincoln Cathedral to be placed where they died around the world. 1 cross was for Lance Corporal Harold, 26, a farmer in an Anzac, Australian New Zealand Army Corps, who survived Gallipoli only to die of a whiz-bang on the Western Front. 1 for Private Charles, 39, a teacher and naturalist, dead from wounds in the chest at Dar es Salaam, Tanzania. 1 for Second Lieutenant Frank, 30, a teacher and a cricketer. He died during the tricky job of repairing communication cables between trenches in France. 1 for Sergeant Barnard, 38, a mathematician and teacher killed in action at Loos. And 1 for Rifleman Leonard, a railway clerk with the London Irish Rifles. His fatal wounds were sustained in an enemy gas attack near Rouen, France. His last words in a note, according to the LincolnshireRegiment.org, were, "My darling mother, don't feel like doing much yet. Lots of love, Len." When thanked by Queen Mary for her sacrifice, their mother, Mrs. Amy Beechey, replied in a few terse words, "It was no sacrifice, ma'am. I did not give them willingly. That's it.
Thank you, Jackie. Concise and moving as always. That book is so loaded. And I've gone all blurry here. I'm going to have to cover my screen for a second and fix the focus. Just hang on. Come on. No, it's not liking it. I'm going to cover myself again. Just hang on.
It's kind of spooky, Derek. It's like we're all passing out.
Yeah.
in the movies, when you're passing out, it gets fuzzy.
Yeah.
Do not adjust your screens, Derek.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
We'll take it.
Not in any kind of clarity. I don't know. This isn't a. This is a bad omen.
Okay.
Just before I'm going to read.
No. Just go. We're listening.
Okay. Yeah. Just close your eyes and. So I'm just going to read. It's kind of a rough poem, I'll admit. I've been rather busy lately with a few other things. So this is one that I'm working on. It's called The Heron. Maybe I should let you, long-legged fisher, hoover up the goldfish in my pond, instead of scaring you off with an arm flail and a holler from behind the bay window, as I did this morning, and twice before when your shadow swooped across the garden, gangly as a pterodactyl, the slow whoop-whoop of your wings fanning the leaves on the laurel hedge, the fish darting for cover under the root ball of the lily pads. It was instinct to give you the bum's rush, but even in your startled turning, I was glad you had come, 2 years into COVID and sick of my own company. Now you return every afternoon, a light in the arbor overlooking the pond, and shrink your neck into a squat S, avoid eye contact, like a guilty lover fresh from an affair. I pretend to look away, and you raise the periscope of your neck, scan the shallows for fish. When I look back, you tip your head back to imitate a stick, blend into the lilac behind you, gray on gray. It seems we are caught in some strange game of push and pull, the way unhappy couples can gamble all their gold not to be hungry or alone. Thank you, thank you. Oh, I've come back into focus as soon as I finish reading. Okay, don't ask me what that means. Anyway, that's all that we have for open micers tonight. So I guess we're going to wrap it up early and remind everybody that next month we're looking at the last Wednesday of the month. If you didn't see that in the chat, because we're shifting our times. So Wednesday, May the 30th, and March the 30th would be for the next one. And Karl wants to jump in and say something about that. Did I get the date right, Karl? No. Karl is muted.
Yes, you got the right date right. It is the 30th of March.
Perfect. Awesome. Okay. All right.
What time?
So 6 o'clock as usual, check in around 5:30, get the mic check, and then, go do what you need to do and come back, whatever works for you. So, So yeah, we'll see how that works out for everybody, and they'll hopefully allow the people from Planet Earth Poetry to join us and swell our ranks a little bit. That won't hurt. No. It was nice when we had them here last month. So thank you everybody for jumping in and sharing your work, and of course huge thank you to Char at Char's Landing, as always, our Zoom host, for making this such a fluid evening. Thank you, Char, wherever you are.
Medal.
Yeah, and thank you to Karl for being our moderator, for lining up. Oh, there's Char. Hello. Thank you to Karl for being our moderator and lining up everybody in the open mic channel, and to Jackie, of course, for getting Shelley teed up for this month, and for all you do to make things happen here. And thank you to Micah, wherever you are, for the pictures that you've taken and that you will forever take, we hope. Yeah, take care, everybody, and be well. And don't forget etransfer@charslanding.com. If you haven't touched down there yet, drop a little money in the jar.
Drop a lot of money, please.
A lot of money. Okay. Yeah.
A little.
Huge donations, gratefully accepted. Yeah. Just yeah.
Thank you, Derek.
All right. My pleasure. And nice to be back in focus again, just in time to say goodbye to everybody.
Right.
And safe journey to Nanaimo.
Thank you. Yeah. Yeah. Hopefully it's not snowing on the hump or anything like that.
Fuzzy, because you knew you had to go to Nanaimo. It was making you go fuzzy.
I guess so. Yeah.
Some poison that made you go invisible almost.
Yeah. It was strange.
Oh.
And what?
Right. Good journey to you.
All right.
Good night, everybody.
Everybody, take care.
Thank
Good night,
you.
all.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye now.